Arrma Mojave, guys. So have you got one of these diffs? We've found them pretty reliable in this truck. We've had this truck for, well over a year or so. Haven't really even touched it. Some people have had problems, but in this video, we're going to have front, middle, and centre all out, so you can look at how you rebuild and replace them, because it is going to be something you're going to have to replace and rebuild, and it will affect the handling of these trucks. So, watch on and see what we do. Right, guys, wheels off. Shocks also off because I've been working on them, which was in another video. And I've also removed these side dirt deflectors. So to get the front diff out, we need to remove the front bumper assembly. So we need to have this off. 2 screws in there, which comes off like that. We then need to remove this assembly, 3 screws there and 2 screws there. So then we need to remove the anti-roll bar links to get access to the front cover. We then have 4 bolts. There's one there, one there, one there, and one there, which we've got to remove. Right, so you also need to remove, there's 2 screws there, which then enables this, the front hinge pin plate to come off. Like so. Then this cover here just pulls off like so, and then our diff should come out. There we go. There is one dirty diff which we will now rebuild. So rear diff removal, similar principle. Now I've got to get this off. Easiest way I found was to remove these 3 screws from this side and the same from that side. That then drops away like that. We then have access to these screws to undo. Then you've got these 5 screws underneath there to remove, and then this will come off. That then comes off like that. We'll give that a clean. Now it's the same scenario. I've got the 4 screws, one there, one up there, 2 the other side, and then these 2 screws underneath. Little tip, to be able to get to these screws, if you can't get it on square, you can get these ball end drivers. They're brilliant for getting in these tight little spaces. Oh yes, we just need to undo the roll bar links just to make it easier for that to pull off. So then there's just these 2 screws here to remove. Your cover comes off there. Then you have the hinge plate, which comes off like that, a bit worn. And then hopefully, there we go, diff cover comes off there. And then we can just tease out, drive shaft's just come out, tease out the diff. There we go, and you'll note that shim. That shim is to set the mesh between the crown and pinion gear. So that's the rear. Exactly the same as the front, which I have just cleaned up a little bit. So we'll only show you a rebuild on one of them. No need to show you a rebuild on both front and rear. Exactly the same, but slightly different process in and out. Right guys, so the centre diff, very easy to remove. First of all, you need to remove one of these bolts from here. So this is loose, the brace. You then, one of those pins off there, this then just pulls out like so, hinges back like that, that goes up there like so, and there's 4 bolts here, 1, 2, 3, 4, which I've already removed, just those ones there. This then pulls up like so. Here is the centre diff. Should just pull out like that, and we can then, it's similar design, I'd expect. It uses same internal components as the rears, but we will show rebuilding that. Right guys, so here we have our centre diff. So a couple of things to note. First of all, check the bearings. Do they feel good? If they're graunchy, service them or replace them. Drive cups. Now, they will show signs of wear. You'll get a groove or a pit or a dunk where the drive shaft goes in. Can you see it in there? I mean, it's not too bad, but if they're really bad, theoretically you should replace them, but I tend to run them until they break because it's only a basher truck. And finally, what's your spur gear like? Is that worn? It might be that you're taking this to bits to service it, or it could be you stripped this, so you're going to have to replace it. So what do we do first? Well, actually, let's just say what that's for. Now, some people will say that's for putting oil in. Some people say it's for bleeding it. I think it's pointless because I don't think you need it for either. So what we need to do to get this to bits, we've got 4 screws there, just need to take them out. Right, so now we can see, guys, what is lurking in here. It's grey, it's miserable, it hasn't been changed for a long time. So now you've got a couple of options. You just whack a bit of oil in there, or give it a good service. Have a look at it. So to take these off, these just pull off. And if any of these teeth are jagged, I mean, you can now go down the route of completely degreasing these in degreaser. I'm not. I'm just going to give a bit of a clean off camera. And that will do for me because this is only a basher truck. But we'll show you how this comes to bits. There's then the little pin in here. See that pin? That then comes out like so. If you can see amongst all the sticky mess. And then there's a washer. Should be a washer there. Yeah, there's a washer there, you see. See, there's a red seal which keeps the goo or the grease in. And then you've got another washer on the outside of there. So that's that side. And then here we have the smaller gears. They should just come out like so. There we go. There's the gasket, which I've just split. So I probably would have to just replace that. And then we have these tiny gears. Again, you could degrease all these. They're in 2 pairs. They've got a cross pin or they've got a recess on there where the pins go together. Again, just check those gears to see if they are, how good they are. If they're sharp, then they are knackered. And then you've got the same situation. You've got the bigger gear in there, which will just come out. If I can get it out. In fact, guys, well, I think what I will do, I will degrease this all so you can see the exact makeup of one of these diffs. So it's all going to come out. I think we will. Can we get that out off camera? There we go. That's come out. There's a pin in there. Going to need some little pliers to get that out. There's the pin. And then degrease it. The only thing I'm not going to degrease, make sure you don't degrease the 2 little O-rings that are in there. You can also see the washer that is there. So if we degrease it, you'll be able to see how this goes together much better. So here we have everything cleaned up. So let's just show you what we need to do. We are going to have to put some oil in it. 100,000 is standard, so that's going to go in it in a minute. Let's build up this side first. So you have this little shim washer that goes on there like that. We're then going to put the O-ring in there. Now if you're doing this dry, make sure you put some oil on that, because when you pass, put the bearing on there as well, when you pass this, falls off, when you pass this through there, if it's completely dry, you're likely to tear that seal. So that's why you'd put a little bit of oil on there. Another washer. They're like a thrust washer almost. Pin on there like so. Then the, what's that? Is that called the sun gear? I can't remember which. There we go. Look, that's so much cleaner than before. Now we've got to basically do the same on this side. We checked the bearings earlier. They were all okay. We've got this little washer, and as you can see, the only thing I haven't been able to get off is a new gasket, so I am just going to reuse that. The main being this is such a thick oil that I'm not too worried I don't think it's going to leak out. Not through that anyway. Right, so we've got that. It's all good. Put on the shim to go through there. Put the washer on. Just going to push that down, make sure that's down there nicely. Then we've got to put on our pin. A little bit fiddly for me to do on camera. So you can see that's on there. And lastly, that gear, you'll just see it sits flush on there. Now we will make up the smaller gears. You need to make sure when you put this together, if it will focus, you've got those two little cutouts. So they sit on like that, so they're in the same plane. If you don't get that together right, it won't work. So you've got the two gears go on like that. You then have these little thrust washers, and then you have these little seats which it sits on. They're almost like a bearing. Now, this is going to be a little bit difficult for me to show on camera, I think. That will make up a half at a time. Right, okay, so we've made up one set of these. The curve goes to the bottom. It might just drop in there for me. There we go, that's in. Nice, you can see I've got this flat on top of there, so I'm now going to make this one up. Gear, thrust washer, there's the bearing locator. Same on this side. Now we're going to see if we can just drop that into there like that. And there we go. They've lined up in the middle there. All good. Now we've got to put some oil in it. We are putting, no, that's the wrong one. This one, 100,000. See on the lid, 100,000. This is really, well, quite thick. Not over thick compared to what you sometimes put in diffs. Right, so I am now just going to turn that round, let that just settle a little bit. You want to just cover the top of those cross pins. So if you aren't in a rush, put it in, give it a few minutes to settle, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave that and come back in a minute. So I've actually let that settle for actually overnight, and you can see it's just covering. Perhaps you could do a fraction more in there, but you see it's settled in there nicely. It's going to need just to cover those cross pins, so I'm just going to blob a fraction more in there. See, it's very thick. That will do. And if you've been watching, you'd have seen that I split the gasket, but I'm not too worried about that. For what we're doing here, this will be okay. So that's on there. Put that on there, and if you filled it right, you shouldn't get any ooze out of there. A little bit dripped out from when I filled it, but no ooze. Then whack these 4 bolts in, and then it's ready to go back in the truck. Right guys, so here we have front and rear diffs. They are exactly the same construction as the centre diff, which I just took to bits. The only difference being that you have a different weight oil in them. 10,000 is what they put in these. You can play about your weights of oils. If you put a thicker oil, it will make the diff stiffer, so it will diff out less. The only difference being that you have this smaller, well, it's the ring gear, isn't it, for the diff. But what we will also just look at while we've got this out now is the pinion gear. So I will just show you what to look for on that. Right guys, so one last thing is we're going to look at the pinion gears all the way in there. Now to get to that, we have to remove this grub screw here. I've already loosened it off, cheated a little bit. If this should be thread locked. If it's a real tight turn, then just get a little bit of heat onto that. Make sure you don't melt your plastic, but get a little bit of heat onto that, and that will help that to come off. Now this should just pull off. If it's a tight fit, what I did, I just used a little bit of something into there. There's a shaft in there. if you can see it. There's a shaft, something on there, a little bit of a tap, and that comes out. And here is your pinion gear. So have a look at that. Has it got any damage to the teeth? Are they really sharp or just pointy? If they're really pointy, then they're no good. That one's not too bad. I mean, it's got a little bit of life left in it. It's not worth replacing that. And you have got, here's your little drive cup. There's no wear on that. That's good. You've got a bearing in there. I've already checked them. They're fine. And there is also a bearing in there. We'll give that a clean out. Check that bearing. As with anything, if any of the bearings are no good, just replace them. There's no point really cleaning them out, I found. Right, guys, so to refit it, it's exactly the reverse. Just push your pinion gear into there. Slide the drive cup on like that. Make sure you line it up with a flat. Grub screw in. Bit of thread lock on that is job done. If you're going to thread lock it, just make sure you degrease it, because thread lock and grease don't mix. Right, guys, so the fitting back is exactly the same, just in reverse of what we just done. So first of all, make sure you put your shim on. That sets the mesh on here, or the backlash on there. Right, guys, so I have just removed this, which is the body's mount. There's 4 screws, one there, one there, one there. And I removed this just to make it easy to get the diff in. Here we go. Here is the diff going in. We're going to try and slide it in with the drive shafts. And what you need to make sure, guys, is you get that shim. The shim has to go in there. Well, now we'll use this marine grease on the gear. Doesn't need too much on there because most of it flings off anyway. There we go. That'll do for that. Case goes back on. Right way up. These 4 bolts in there. There, there, and there. And that, for all intents and purposes, is the diff back in. I'm just moving. I've left the centre drive shaft out. I'm going to put the centre diff in last, just so I can turn it, just to make sure it feels free. And it feels lovely. It feels nice and free. So we can now just go about putting on all the rest of the back of the framework, which again is exactly the same as what we did, just in reverse. And then we'll move on to the front. Right, guys, so the front diff, pretty much exactly the same. Make sure you got that shim in there. May not be able to see very well. We're going to try and tease those drive shafts in at the same time. So that should then go in there like that. Didn't manage to get the drive shafts in, so I'm just going to remove those pins there and just whack them in. We will just put a little bit of grease on there. Just feel it round. And then the diff cover on. Bolts on. These on. Again, it's exactly the same as the reverse as where we took it off. All the framework on, and that is the front diff in. Right, guys, so we've got all the diffs back in. I didn't show you the centre diff because that's easy. Just watch the removal. It's the opposite of that. But I did make a massive mistake. I put the diff in the wrong way round. So in actual fact, the front wheels will go backwards when the fronts were going forward. I did just take it out as soon as I realised, but I didn't film that. So make sure you don't do that. Fit it the opposite side to what you see I did in the picture. Easy mistake to make. Usually the moulding that doesn't let you do that, but whether that's, well, it let me do it, so who knows. But that's all back together. We will give that a blast. Got some nice weather at the moment. We'll give it a blast, see how those diffs are all going to hold up. And yeah, that is the Mojave diff rebuild. Sorry, slight miscommunication there. I'll copy you out there. Bloody hell, this has certainly got some speed. reckon it's heavier springs and oil still on this. I was miles away from you, don't worry. I'm nearly in the water there though.